This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. We are taping this on a Monday. It's running on a Tuesday. On the phone right now, our Pulitzer Prize winner, Grantland's movie critic. Even though I hate the word critic, we got to come up with a better name than critic. Grantland's movie celebrator. Celebrator?
But we both know that's not true.
Nitpicker?
This is why critic is just an easier word, because I can do both things. I can nitpick and I can celebrate.
All right. Well, Wesley Morris is on the line. We are starting a new gimmick that could get canceled after one episode, or we're just going to keep doing it. I don't know. Or maybe we should do it in print form. We're going to try it in podcast form, and either it'll work or it doesn't, or it won't work. But the impetus for this is we're going to make it work. The impetus for this is Elysium came out last week, which I saw and Wesley saw. Jodie Foster is horrible in this movie, and the critics were kind to her, as they always are, because Jodie Foster gets one of the all-time big free passes that any actor or actress has really ever gotten in TV or movies, and everybody's just always willing to look the other way when she's awful in something or when she hasn't made a good movie in 20 years. And this isn't going. I don't mean to intend this as a rag on Jodie Foster session, but I'm just talking about. I think it's really interesting sometimes when the perception of somebody's work, whether it's a director, an actor, or an actress, or a TV showrunner, or whatever, when the perception totally exceeds the reality. And with Miss Foster, that perception has become 97% of what people think she is as an actress. If you actually look through her IMDb, it's a train wreck. And I was emailing this to you, and you get defensive because you love Jodie Foster, and we decided we were just going to argue about this on the podcast. First of all, true or false, Jodie Foster was terrible in Elysium.
She was not good. I'm not disagreeing with you. That was the impetus for this conversation, was that you sent me a note saying that I was too kind, I was not mean enough, and I felt like I was as unkind as I could afford to be. And I think that one of the problems with her in that movie is that she doesn't have anything to play, right? That part is sort of underwritten and is asking her, Jodie Foster, to sort of enliven that part with the qualities that Jodie Foster can bring a mediocre, sort of poorly written part. And I think, in some ways it's a stereotype. It's sort of like the sort of hard-nosed, steely government official who exists only to oppress and deny and destroy, basically. I don't think it's the best use of her talent. But I also think that even at the point at which you... Okay, so I should ask you this. First of all, when did you give up? When was the point at which you just said, you know what, enough with this. She needs to just never be seen again, or figure out a way to matter, to be meaningful.
You mean in this movie?
No. I mean in general. When did you quit?
Oh, look.
Like, what was the movie where you just? What was the straw that broke the camel's back for you?
Look, I'm a results guy. I have a sports background. I judge people by wins and losses. And Jodie Foster...
This is a little different, though, Bill. This is very subjective.
Well, but here's the thing, though. I think there's a perception in the general public that Jodie Foster is one of the best actresses in the world. That if you were making a list and Meryl Streep would be at the top of the list, that she is in that, like, she's in the conversation with Meryl Streep. I think would be, she's a two-time Oscar winner. I think people think she's in that conversation. And my point is, I don't think she is.
Okay. It's a different thing, though. Okay, so why don't you explain for everybody and for me too, how you would characterize Jodie Foster. Like, what is it about her that maybe you might even like? Because presumably at some point you were on board, maybe then you got off, or were you never on board?
All right. Well, first of all, we forgot to set up the gimmick properly because this is called overrated, underrated, or properly rated.
Yes.
We're going to come to a conclusion by the end of this podcast. So here's the thing. I'm not against Jodie Foster. I think she's a fine actress. I think she's been good in some movies. She's been bad in some movies. And she had two iconic performances, one that happened in 1988 and the other happened in 1991. Now, 1991, I was in college when Silence of the Lambs came out. I went with my then college girlfriend. We saw that in the theater in Worcester, Massachusetts. I think I was.
How long after the movie did the relationship end?
Right. That was my first long girlfriend. And I think I might have been 21 years old. I think I might have just gotten my real ID like 6 months earlier. So that's how long it's been since she's been quote unquote great in a movie. And so I want to break this down a couple ways. First of all, you look at Meryl Streep, like you look at a performance like Devil Wears Prada, right? Which is in the wrong hands is a role that really could have been bad. And in the right hands, she was great. And every scene she just dominated. And it was just like probably one of the best 4 or 5 Meryl Streep performances. And she made a role where basically they were like, look, you're just going to be a bitch. And she took that and made it into an awesome role. And it's a really good movie and a really rewatchable movie. Now this role that Jodie Foster had in Elysium, kind of the same thing, right? You're a cold-hearted bitch. You have no regard for the people on Earth. You are just almost a machine. The way you approach everything, you have no humanity in you. That's a decent role. I mean, that's not much different than the Devil Wears Prada role, right? You get to wear fancy clothes, you get to just kick ass, and yet she's horrible in it. And as usual, as Jodie Foster's biggest defender, you're making excuses for her.
I'm not her biggest. I mean, look, I will say 2 things about the Devil Wears Prada versus Elysium. First of all, Devil Wears Prada from top to bottom is a more successful movie than Elysium is from top to bottom. Second, Meryl Streep is the movie. I mean, there are many things in that movie that are delightful. Anne Hathaway is wonderful. Stanley Tucci is very good. Emily Blunt is, I mean, she's kind of your MVP candidate as far as I'm concerned in that movie. And like every time I watch it, I am consistently amazed by how great she is.
Yep.
But Meryl Streep had something to play on the page. Do you know what I mean? And I think that there might be a better way to look at this, I think. Because if you back up a little bit, I mean, and I think that for Meryl Streep, that Devil Wears Prada performance changed her career in a way that Elysium will not do for Jodie Foster, I don't think. Before Devil Wears Prada, I think the popular understanding of Meryl Streep was that she was, she was the ultimate actress. She had no real entertainment value to offer an entire generation of kids who, for them, this actress was their parents' actor.
Right, an old fart.
Right. Meryl Streep hadn't done anything that was a commercial hit to the degree that A Devil Wears Prada was a big hit. Before that, I mean, she had been in things that were kind of popular, or her Meryl, she was in the 80s, obviously, she was Out of Africa, that was an enormous hit. She had been in successful movies, but she was still Hollywood actor, your parents' actor, and it doesn't matter how old your parents are or how old you are. She was your parents' actor, whether you were 9 or 39.
Right.
And I think that movie, it was, it was a best-selling book. The movie was a hit. She was very good in it. And I think that she hit a lot of generational rungs. Kids love that movie. Young adults love that movie. Older people love that movie. People Meryl Streep's age, and Meryl Streep is in her early 60s, love that movie. And I think from there, it just kind of loosened her up. She was free with herself to be a movie star. She made Mamma Mia, which I think is a better movie than 90% of people who have opinions about movies for a living. Maybe that's what we should call my job, Bill. People who have opinions about movies for a living.
Movie opinioners, yeah.
Yeah, opinioners. I think that that movie just sort of gave her a new freedom. I don't know if she would acknowledge this, but I think she seemed a lot more fun to a lot more people. In a movie like The Iron Lady, for instance, I don't think that movie would have been a hit if she had made it 20 years ago. It's a movie she definitely would have made 20 years ago. But I don't think the public's interest, even the limited interest, that movie was by comparison, a pretty big hit.
Wait, I have a really important question.
Yes.
Could Jodie Foster have played that part in Devil Wears Prada?
No, she could not have played that part. And I think that there are really probably maybe 3 women who could have played that part. Though, I mean, in brought to it the degree of bitchiness and intelligence and comedy that Meryl Streep brought to that part. I think Glenn Close is the other person. I think that if you want to sort of be kind of crazy about it, I think Catherine Deneuve is the only other person who could have played that part. The great French actress.
I'm really glad you brought up Glenn Close, because she was going to be part of my argument. So, in my opinion, Jodie Foster overrated, Glenn Close underrated, and Glenn Close is basically Jodie Foster with worse PR, and not having the child actress background or the whole John Hinckley thing. And I want to get to the John Hinckley thing because actually we should just cover it right now because I brought it up. The John Hinckley thing is a really interesting fork in the road moment for Jodie Foster. And one of the reasons why, this is why I don't want to have a rag session on her. I think she's had a really hard life. And I think having that happen to you when you're in college, when you become the focal point of something like that, is a really wildly unfair thing to happen to somebody who is trying to act for a living and just trying to care about their work. And I think it's affected a lot of the choices that she's made. And
so
if you
we
look
should
at
explain that John Hinckley is the man who tried to kill President Reagan on her behalf, basically.
To impress her.
Yes. And because he had seen Taxi Driver and wanted to sort of, I don't know, be Travis Bickle for the day, basically.
Right. And if you look at her career, she was about as accomplished of a child actress as you can be. We think of somebody like Lindsay Lohan now as having a good career before she went off the rail and moved, Mean Girls and Freaky Friday.
Right. They talked about Lindsay Lohan as being Jodie Foster, not just because she played, she was in a remake of Jodie Foster's part in Freaky Friday, but because she seemed to be an actor who had a similar kind of husky voiced, intelligent, sort of cerebral. She had something, Lindsay Lohan, and it was similar to Jodie Foster, what she had when she was the same age.
And then there's one other actress who had that, I think, Diane Lane. And what's interesting if you go back when Little Romance came out, which I think was late 70s, and Sir Laurence Olivier was in it, and then Diane Lane was on the cover of Time magazine, then she was in The Outsiders, and everybody thought she was going to be, the it girl. And what's interesting is she had a little different, it fell off the rails for a different reason than Jodie Foster. She just picked bad parts. There's a famous story about she picked Streets of Fire over Risky Business and Slash. She could have been the prostitute in Risky Business with Tom Cruise. That would have blown her. She would have been an A-lister after that, right? Instead, she did Streets of Fire with Michael Pare, and within 6 years, she's doing TV movies. And took her another 10 years to bounce back from that. But I don't think it's a great thing to be a really successful child actress and then come out of that. And I just don't think you're going to have the same career. Nobody had even seen Meryl Streep until the late 70s when she did, I think, Deer Hunter would have been her first big budget one, but she was probably in her mid 20s at that point. Anyway, the John Hinckley thing, I think affected a lot of the choices that she makes. For instance, what comedies has Jodie Foster been in? I think Maverick is like the closest to a comedy, right?
Yeah. Okay. So did you like her in Maverick?
I actually thought she was okay in Maverick. I didn't mind her in Maverick.
Fantastic in that movie. I think that the thing about Jodie Foster is if you can get her to sort of leave her comfort zone, because Jodie Foster has a thing, right? She has what? Can you for yourself try to describe for her? I mean, for everybody, what it is about Jodie? Like, what are some characteristics of a Jodie Foster performance that are sort of common through each movie?
So she can go a couple directions, right? She can be the brooding, intense, kind of insecure Clarice Starling direction.
Mm-hmm.
She can go woman who's in peril,
mm-hmm.
which we saw a bunch of times, right? Panic Room. What was the other movie that came out with the Death Wish ripoff? What was that one called?
Oh, the Brave one, right.
The Brave one and Flight Plan. So she made 3 of those last decade where it's like kind of smart, successful career woman who's now in some sort of peril because of some odd situation. And then
right.
the third wrinkle she has is like historical where she gets to have an accent.
Mm-hmm.
And those seem to be her 3 lanes, unless you count, the Maverick, which really, that was the only time in 25 years where she's played a part like that. Right?
Yes. So here's what I would say. I would say that the underlying connector to all of those parts, the good ones, the bad ones, everything, the performances anyway, there's a kind of trauma in each of those parts. The iconic ones, the sort of lesser ones. She's playing characters who are either from the outset recovering from something or somewhere the sort of dramatic fulcrum involves something happening to her that she has to get over. There's some sort of traumatic event that happens. Her boyfriend is killed. She is sexually assaulted. Her daughter goes missing on a plane. People are trying to break into her house. It isn't just that she's defending herself against victimhood. Silence of the Lambs, this horrible thing happened to her when she was a girl. She has a really interesting persona that I think she's been really comfortable pursuing. I think that when she started her career as a teenager, I mean, she was just a smart, sort of curious, tough kid, right? That was the thing that appealed to her. I mean, that appealed to people, and that was like the thing that connected these parts. She was kind of an oddball in a way. She was smarter than everybody else. She kind of is like Natasha Lyonne, like maybe 10 years ago. The same sort of like wise ass, know-it-all, kind of sexual, but kind of an indeterminate, ambiguous sexuality. And then the Hinckley thing happened. And the Hinckley thing completely reroutes her into this other place where in each part, it seems, she is exploring, in each sort of major part, she's exploring something. She's raising a kid by herself because the father's stuck. Something along those lines where she just isn't, she can never be a fully socially adjusted human being. Nell being the ultimate example of that, where she plays a woman who is, behind the rest of society and has to speak a different language because she's fallen out of contact with the rest of the world. I mean,
but hold on, Craig, I got to interrupt. Yeah. That was a horrible movie. She got nominated for an Oscar for that. I defy anybody to watch Nell. Nell is excruciating. It's really one of the most excruciating movies that ever got somebody nominated for an Oscar, and there's no way anybody enjoyed it. That was like classic. She was in, she won 2 Oscars, and she could have put out anything at that point. People would have been like, oh, great. That was really good Jodie Foster. That was horrible. Horrible movie. Anyway, go ahead.
Hay in the wind, Bill. Hay in the wind.
Maybe.
I mean, she just, I think Nell was an interesting movie too, because she made it the same year. I think that came out the same year as Maverick. And
Yep, it did.
It looked like her career was on some kind of upswing, right? She had done Summersby the year. Okay. So the other thing that I would like to talk about with Jodie Foster, and the reason that I think she's a fascinating movie star, is that, you know, there's two tracks happening. There's the thing I just explained about the trauma. Then there's this other thing where she seems to always be, when I least believe her, are the moments in movies in which the movie is sort of hinging on a kind of romantic question or a sexual question, and it requires her, like it's the way Summersby requires us to believe that she and Richard Gere were two people in love, and he goes off to war and comes back, her husband in that movie, perhaps a different man, perhaps a man, an imposter husband, basically, that she goes along with because it's just sort of more domestically expedient in some ways, and also because she wants to believe it. She and Richard Gere have some of the most nauseating screen chemistry I've ever seen between two people in a movie. It is like watching, I don't know, a coat hook up with a hanger. I don't know. It's not appealing at all. It's something I would never want to watch.
Well, hold on, though. But so then 4 years later, she manages to match that lack of chemistry with Matthew McConaughey in Contact.
Okay. But that's a different thing, right? Because, okay, that to me, Summersby seems like you get two really good movie stars together and you see what happens when you put them in the same bed, right?
Yep.
I believe the casting in that movie. I just don't believe the movie itself. I don't believe them together. I think they have nothing to do with each other as movie stars. They can't act their way into chemistry. That's not how that sort of thing works. So watching them kiss makes my stomach turn. But then you look at what she and Mel Gibson have a year later in Maverick, and it is light, it is fun, it is sexual. Mel Gibson is such a good movie star that he makes her seem just as sort of effortless in her screen self and just as comfortable being on screen as he is. And James Garner also comes in and greases some wheels too. And they just make her a really appealing person to watch. And I think that you hope that from there would be some sort of forward motion where she had sort of found a new place of comfort. But she goes right back into, from there it's Nell. Contact is about 3 years later.
Well, hold on, though. Let's break this into tiers because so we have she has that whole Lindsay Lohan type where everybody just is convinced she's going to be a big star and she's a child actor. She goes to Yale. She does. I actually remember Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane was a terrifying TV movie that I shouldn't have watched when I was 6. But she goes through all of that. The Hinckley thing happens, I think, right after she did Foxes. And then if you look at the IMDb, she basically just disappears for a couple years. And her first quote unquote comeback movie was in '84, Hotel New Hampshire, which I still don't know why that wasn't a good movie, but it wasn't. But on paper, it still feels like it should have been. I don't know what really happened. So she goes, these are the next few movies: Blood of Others, My Letter to George, Five Corners, which is actually like a really interesting movie because there's a lot of stars in it, but it's poorly done, but it's kind of strangely fascinating. Siesta. Yeah, she's good in it. In Five Corners. Now, in '88, before The Accused, which she had to audition for, she made a movie with Mark Harmon called Stealing Home. That is one of my wife's favorite movies, randomly. And she's actually really good in that movie, I thought. That was the first time you talk about like that Maverick kind of chemistry with Gibson. She kind of actually has that with Mark Harmon.
Yeah, I remember when Mark Harmon was almost a thing.
Yeah.
Like 86 to 88, Mark Harmon seemed like that was going to happen. But you know what happened? We had what I call a Hollywood market correction, and Kevin Costner took over.
Yes. I love when that happens, when somebody steals somebody else's lane.
Yeah. We couldn't live in a world where Kevin Costner and Mark Harmon were operating at the same time. So the market corrected, and Kevin Costner came out the winner of the market correction.
It's like almost you can't start two quarterbacks on the same team. You can't start Kevin Costner and Mark Harmon.
Nope.
One of them has to win. They have to fight to the death. And Mark Harmon ended up, probably ended up making $1 kajillion on NCIS. So I think it worked out okay for him.
Yeah, but it took a long time for NCIS to happen.
Right. So then this is when Jodie's career turns. This is now tier 3 of Jodie's career. The Accused, which she was amazing in. Also an amazing role. I think that's a role that would have changed a lot of people's lives. She hit it out of the park. Got to give her credit for that. But something called Catchfire, which I didn't see. Silence of the Lambs in 91. In my opinion, her best movie. And a great movie and a memorable movie and a movie that still holds up and just all the best uses of her in that movie. She even had chemistry with the older FBI director. So from there, she directs Little Man Tate. She makes Shadows in the Fog, which in the IMDb it says she played prostitute. Summersby.
She's good. It's a small part. She plays one of the prostitutes near the corner. I mean, she's good in it.
Right.
She, comes on to John Cusack and the whole thing. It's not bad. She's good. Or maybe she comes on to Woody Allen in that. I can't remember now who she comes on to.
Something. It's a Woody Allen movie. Maverick, which she's good in. I agree with you. Nell was an atrocity, which nobody ever watched again. So that's 94. Now we're hitting the fourth stretch of her career, which she took a couple years off. Then she was in Contact, which is unwatchable. Unwatchable. The and unwatchable isn't even, you can't even say that strongly enough. Anna and the King. I don't remember that one. Dangerous Lives of Alton. That's the remake of The King and I, where she plays, the Deborah Carr part, but it's not a musical. So there's that. So is that in the L column? It's in the L column. It just isn't. It doesn't really work very well. It's got you need her and Charlie Fat, where he's the king and she's Anna Leon Owens, and she goes and she teaches the kids. It's just that story does not work in iconically. The musical is such an iconic event, and you've got such great songs. The costumes it's fine. It's an L. We'll move on. Okay, so now we've moved 3 years ahead now to 2002. Dangerous Lives of Altar Boys, which I remember being not good. It's not bad. She's not bad, not good. Right. She has nothing to do. She produced it, though, if memory serves. So, she cared about it. 2002. Now we are 11 years since Silence of the Lambs. 11. We are now 11 years later. And the only movie that she's made in that 11 years that we both liked was Maverick. So 11 years. That's a long time. Like she could have gone in a coma and made one less movie than she made in those 11 years that I liked. She did. It should be said, The Contact was a hit. It's a Robert Zemeckis come movie. On. It was. Look, I'm just pointing out that it was not. It was a hit, and I think people were desperate to see her in something. That was the movie that she had made after Silence of the Lambs. Or people. It wasn't Nell, which was not a. It was. Nell was kind of a hit, but I think the public was still with her. And I think that movie was a hit because it was a big deal. It was her making a movie with Robert Zemeckis, and it had, Matthew McConaughey was part of the marketing. My point about him relative to Mel Gibson and whoever we were talking about before Mel Gibson. Richard Gere. Richard Gere, right. I think that McConaughey was not a casting decision based on people sort of looking at what was hot. Like McConaughey, that was his moment in 97. He, did A Time to Kill in, I believe, 96. Yeah. And he was all anybody wanted to put in the movie because he was sexy, but it was like a hand-me-down sexiness, right? For everybody, he was Paul Newman, the second coming of Paul Newman. Right.
And again, he's an actor with nothing to do with Jodie Foster. Zero. They have nothing to do with each other. You want to beat up on Jodie Foster for being bad in Contact, which she's not, I would say.
She's bad.
I would beat up on him twice as hard for
He's horrible. Both of them are bad.
Accepting the role of a religious person. You don't believe it at all. And once he shows up, the movie's supposed to take off, and it does the opposite.
All right. Well, are you done blaming other people for Jodie Foster's bad movies? Because is there anybody left? Because in 2002, her alleged comeback movie, and people are now ready for a good Jodie Foster movie. And the reason they're ready, they're ready because it's been 11 years. That's why they're ready. She makes Fincher, and everybody's just fired up and through the moon about Fincher at this point. So she makes Panic Room with him. I saw it in the theater. I thought it was okay. It's really, really well done. She's good in it. I don't think it's a great movie. Maybe it's a win, but it's like she pitched 6 innings and then her bullpen kind of saved her ass in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Could we say that?
Yeah, we can say that. I don't think the movie's very good. I think she and Kristen Stewart are really good in it. But it's a bogus movie. You don't believe it for the movie. It's one of those movies, Bill, that it should end about 10 minutes after the burglary happens.
Right.
But it needs to go on for another 65 minutes because there needs to be a movie.
It's really well done. It's very creatively done, but the bottom line is you never for a second think Jodie Foster or her daughter are getting killed. And
you also just never believe that Jodie Foster, this is the problem with Jodie Foster. We all know, or the thing that she gives off in a movie is just intelligence. She is a smart woman. She is extremely intelligent, and she radiates that intelligence. And anytime a script asks her to be stupid for 10 seconds, the movie falls apart because you just don't believe she would be that stupid or that that her common sense wouldn't kick in or her just her logic wouldn't kick in. That's also why Summersby didn't make any sense to me because Jodie Foster, that character might not know that Laurel Summersby might not know that her husband is an imposter, but Jodie Foster would definitely know.
Okay, so whether it's a no decision or she got a garbage win because her bullpen saved her, not a 3-hit shutout. So
but I would say it's a win because the movie was also a hit.
So then a very long engagement, which she had a bit part in. 3 years later, 2005, Flight Plan. Mm-hmm. Given that a loss.
In my house, we call that Panic Room 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, they must have just thrown a lot of money at her. But at that point, she's telling me creatively she's giving up a little bit. Inside Man, Spike Lee's last good movie. I thought she was good in it. She certainly doesn't carry the movie, but she's good in it, and it's a good movie. I give her a win.
And that's a win because you know what she does in that movie? She changes the energy, and she's a surprise in about 3 different ways, right? Oh, wow, Jodie Foster and Spike Lee are making a movie together. Oh, wow, it's a small part. And oh, wow, she actually manages to be kind of sexier than Denzel Washington when they have that scene together. She's going for a very specific type of person, too. That sort of hard-ass New York, power broker kind of person. And she's really good in her sort of limited scenes. And the part is also, it's a pivotal part. It's a key part. And she's just really good at it. I was shocked by, where that energy and that sort of, that carnality came from. She always has that. But in this movie, it's written into the role. She doesn't bring it. It's there for her to play.
So I agree it's a win. She goes from there to Nims Island, which I think
you skipped the Brave one, right? Isn't the Brave one?
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. I skipped. My apologies. I skipped an awful movie.
Right.
Yeah, she's bad in it, and now this is her third. It's almost like the trilogy of smart women in a panic situation. This one, This bothered me. I got to be honest. This one bothered me because I had wanted them to remake Death Wish. I think if you go in my archives, I've even written it multiple times. Like Death Wish is dying to be remade the right way, and instead they ruined it with The Brave One. And this is a terrible movie. She's bad in it. It sucks.
Yeah, I mean, but I will say this: it is the ultimate Jodie Foster movie. It is a movie for people who have been trying to figure out what it is about Jodie Foster that either they love or hate, and for Jodie Foster to sort of maybe go back and look at like, well, what was I about in the movies? Like, what was my thing? What did I bring to the movies? What were my sort of what were my neuroses? I think this is the movie for me where she gives you what could have been. She gives you the path not taken, or the path sort of like taken from her. So the first 15 minutes of the movie, if you remember, Bill, she's like happy in love, walking her dog in the park with her boyfriend, who's Naveen Andrews. She's like wearing a skirt. She seems like it could be a romantic comedy, the end of a romantic comedy. And, as it turns out, that is the end of the romantic comedy, because what happens is after 15 minutes, Bill?
It's suddenly not as romantic.
It's like somebody comes and kills the boyfriend and beats her to a bloody pulp.
Yep.
And puts her in the hospital. So she gets out of this coma and decides, oh, wait, you know what? I have had enough of being cute and frilly and wearing skirts. I'm a hard-ass vigilante, and I'm going to make people pay. And I'm going to go around New York City killing people who get on my nerves. And I'm going to go on the radio and just talk about New York in this very sort of, opportunity lost or, paradise lost sort of way. It's a fascinating, bad movie, but is nonetheless really the source of fascination comes entirely from her. And it's just so strange because I don't know if you remember this, because you probably did what I should have done, which is purge the movie from my memory.
I did.
There's an amazing scene between her and Zoe Kravitz in the back of a limo. And Zoe Kravitz, or maybe it's a town car, for the sake of accuracy, Zoe Kravitz basically plays a strung-out hooker. And Zoe Kravitz being the daughter of Lenny Kravitz and Lisa Bonet.
Yes.
And it is just such a strangely erotic scene. They're talking in the back of this town car, and she's trying to help this kid who's been assaulted or something. And it's just not much there from a writing standpoint, but she lowers her voice and makes this really sort of amazing contact with Zoe Kravitz. And it completely changes the chemistry, it chemically imbalances the movie. So that wherever the movie goes after that scene, you don't care, because you realize that there's something amazing happening in that town car, and you want to stay with that. But the movie has to go off and do all this other stupid stuff. And it's just every single beat in the Jodie Foster thing, and the sort of cerebral toughness, the refusal to be the girl in the movies that everybody expects women to be in movies, the subtextual homosexuality, all of that stuff is in that movie, and still it's bad. It can't be. Nothing Neil Jordan, who's the director, there's nothing he can do to sort of make it work.
Yeah.
She turns in to Travis Bickle, basically, Jodie Foster. She turns into the Robert De Niro character from Taxi Driver, and winds up in that scene with Zoe Kravitz in that town car, rescuing herself from Taxi Driver. It's totally fascinating, and yet it's such a bad movie.
We're about done with her IMDb. She did a little Nims Island thing. The Beaver is terrible.
Did you see The Beaver? Yeah,
Let's just move on. I don't know what Carnage was. I don't even remember that.
Oh, Bill. Okay, so here's the thing. We arrived at this point in Jodie Foster's career, and I mean, there's some things to be said about The Beaver and how bad it is and why it's so bad. And that's because Mel Gibson is her friend, and she loves Mel Gibson despite everybody's got somebody in their life that they love, despite what their friends are telling them not to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't do it. It's bad for you. He is like, everybody hates him, and you're just like, I don't care what everybody says. I'm in love with you. Or you're my friend. You're the friend I can't turn my back on. I can't do it. Forget everybody else. It's me and you. We are, she and Mel Gibson, they're ride or die. Like, they're ride or die. It doesn't matter what anybody says. So, I mean, it's not a good movie. She doesn't do anything to make it better. She's trying to redeem him.
You're talking about the Beaver.
The Beaver, yeah.
Yeah. The Beaver's not good. I don't blame her for doing it, but it's not good. She wanted to do a comeback movie for him, and it's not a good movie.
Right.
I'm giving it a loss. I think she gets knocked out of the game in like 3 2/3 in that one.
It's a loss. It's definitely a loss because she's also terrible in it because it's another performance where you just don't believe Jodie Foster would be that tolerant and forgiving and patient and loving.
What about Carnage? What was this Carnage movie that Roman Polanski directed? Because I did not see this movie.
You should see this because this is the best thing. I think it's the best thing she's done as an actor, where most of the movie belongs to her in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It's based on that Yasmin Reza play called Gods of Carnage, or God of Carnage. And she plays, it's her, John C. Reilly, Kate Winslet, and Christoph Waltz. And Kate Winslet and Christoph Waltz play a couple, like sort of a well-to-do, uptight Manhattan couple. He's a banker. She might be a lawyer. And Jodie Foster and John C. Reilly are sort of more workaday, upper middle class people. She's an art dealer or something like that, but not quite that. And he's some sort of real estate developer or land developer or something. He might own a plumbing company. I can't remember. But anyway, these two couples come together when their kids get into a fight. And it appears to be the one kid is injured and the other kid, the Kate Winslet and Christoph Waltz character's kid, is the sort of perpetrator of the violence, I guess. And so these four people sit around in Jodie Foster and John C. Reilly's living room and talk about how to solve this, what punishment should be meted out to the children, or how to solve the problem of who did what to whom.
Wait a second. Don't tell me anymore, because now I want to see it.
You should see it. But my point is, her character is, they're all kind of uptight in their way. But I think Jodie Foster reaches this sort of operatic high of uptightness. And, people don't seem to like this movie, and I'm not exactly sure why the movie doesn't work for them. But Yasmina Reza writes these really great setups for actors to play. There was a Broadway version that had her, and that had James Gandolfini and Marcia Gay Harden and Jeff Daniels and Hope Davis. The four of them played these parts. And, the play was fantastic. I think the movie suffers from being maybe a little claustrophobic and kind of sort of winkingly cruel. But I think the movie is sort of underrated as for performance. Four actors all being on the same page, and I think that she is fantastic. That by the end of the movie, I was blown away by how good she is. Christoph Waltz is also very good, but in the opposite direction. He's very cool, but she loses her mind by the end of this movie. It's like 85 minutes, and by the end of it, you're like, oh yeah, Jodie Foster. I don't know why I could have given up on her.
We're giving her a win because the last movie is Elysium, which she's really bad in. So if you go through her career as an adult, here are the wins. And I'm not including Taxi Driver and Freaky Friday, which I thought she was great in both of those. So really all through the 80s, nothing until The Accused and Stealing Home. I'm giving her like a half win for Stealing Home. It's a supporting performance, but I think she was really good.
She gets a total win for Stealing Home.
Okay, good. All right, we'll give her a win. So she gets 2 for those. Silence of the Lambs, Maverick, Shadows and Fogs, we're giving her like 2 shutout innings in relief.
We give her credit for like going near Woody Allen during the Soon Yi affair, because that's when that movie happened.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll give her a win for that.
Can we back up for 1 second to Siesta, by the way?
Okay.
A movie that nobody saw when it came out, really, but it was an Ellen Barkin movie, and Ellen Barkin, at the height of her Ellen Barkin-ness, is so hot, and she was in everything she made between 1987 and 1991.
Yeah.
She's so sexy in that movie, and Jodie Foster has a sort of small part, but it's a pivotal part. And she's it's a bad movie. It's not good, but it has a kind of real sexual energy that is just, it's undeniable. And Gabriel Byrne is in it, and Grace Jones is in it. Some of it is terrible. It's bad. But Jodie, I mean, I would say it's half a win.
Okay. So to recap, we're going to go Siesta for 3 shutout innings. Stealing Home, you want to give her a win, I'm fine with that. Accused, Cy Young award-winning season. Silence of the Lambs, ditto. Maverick, now we're Shadow in the Fogs, a couple innings. Panic Room, we're like begrudgingly giving her the win. The bullpen had to save her. And even that, it was like an 8-7 game. And then Inside Man, and then you say Carnage. Now we're talking almost 35 years here, and I didn't even get to 10 movies.
Yeah,
it's a problem, Wesley.
Okay, so so I'm filling out my Hall of Fame ballot, right? And I'm taking into consideration a few things. You have to take into consideration a lot of things that Jodie Foster didn't do, right? I think. She didn't do anything that I would remotely consider, with the exception of maybe Anna and the King. She didn't do anything that I would call a sellout.
Fair. Very fair.
It seemed like she was taking money for the paycheck, or taking a movie for the paycheck, where it seemed like she had lost her mind in a way that was different from the other ways in which in the movies she had played characters who had lost their minds. She never did what a lot of stars at 50 years old, which is her age now, have done. I mean, she never made a movie where you just thought, I don't know why Jodie Foster would necessarily have done that. I think Summersby, I would make a case that Summersby is that kind of movie. But she didn't make them very often. And when she did make them, you kind of understand why she might have wanted to do it. I think that the value that she brings to the movies from a historical standpoint is that the movies, I mean, she's a mold-breaking star. I mean, there are a lot of people who, we've been discussing actors who seem like Jodie Foster, like Lindsay Lohan, but, we see how that turned out, or, is going to turn out. You compared her to Glenn Close, which is an interesting comparison, since I would never have done that. And I would like to hear more about why you feel.
I'm ready. This is the crux of the argument, right? We're both agreeing that Jodie Foster is an excellent actress who maybe didn't pick the best movies. And
I think she took the only movie she could have played, though. This is the thing. I don't think she lost out on parts or missed parts because of poor decision-making. I just think that, as the screenwriter became a less integral or less sort of valued part of the filmmaking apparatus, there became, and women became increasingly ancillary to the Hollywood narrative. I just don't think she had anything to do in the movie. So, I mean, there's a real sort of cultural shift that happens that she kind of gets locked out of, because as she's aging, you've got two things happening. You've got the movie business changing in this very, obvious way, where she's getting older and there are fewer parts for any women, let alone a woman who is over the age of 35.
True.
So you can't quite, her clout and her stardom and her being Jodie Foster continue to get her starring roles in movies like The Brave One and Flight Plan, but there just isn't a lot for her to do. So,
well, hold on though. Here's an example. Here's an example. There are two parts that are the type of parts that she needed at this point of her career and that never happened. One, we talked about Devil Wears Prada, that Meryl Streep kind of, that just would have been a different look, and she would have looked great in it and worn good clothes and been an awesome actress in it and stole scenes and just made you come away from the movie going, oh yeah, Jodie Foster's a f***ing awesome actress. I forgot. And then another type of movie, I don't know how you feel about 6 Degrees of Separation, but.
Oh, that's a really good call. The Stockard Channing part in that movie, is that what you're talking about?
The Stockard Channing part in that movie is the type of part, and maybe she thought that the Roman Polanski movie was that part, but the career-driven mid-40s mom or wife who cares about all these things, but then her world comes crash. Like, she never had that part either. And that's why I talk about with like bad luck with picking scripts. Like, she needed a couple of those. I actually thought Elysium, when I first saw her, I was like, oh, this would be good. Jodie Foster as like this futuristic villain. Like, this is kind of a good, she's wearing nice clothes. She looked great hairdo, power haircut. And then she was awful in it. But you mentioned Glenn Close. Now you just go through Glenn Close just in the 80s. World According to Garp, she's great in that movie.
Yeah,
it's by the way, one of my favorites. Big Chill. The Natural, she's actually, I don't know if she's good in that movie or not. I mean, she's very
Natural?
It's not like she has a ton to do in that movie, right?
No,
she's just like in white light all the time.
Exactly. She's there to sort of she's basically beatified. She has nothing to do, really, but her purpose is, it's to sort of represent the thing that would make a baseball player want to hit a home run.
Yeah, she's the angel of the movie. I mean, it's a win. I'm just not saying I wouldn't put her in her top 5. Jagged Edge, she's actually good in. Jagged Edge, she's good. Fatal Attraction, she's amazing. She's amazing in Fatal Attraction.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like, if she had won the Oscar for Fatal Attraction, would you have been okay with that?
Yeah, but she lost to Cher, who was even better in Moonstruck.
Fair enough. Dangerous Liaisons a year later, 1988. She's amazing in that movie. She was amazing.
But she lost to Jodie Foster.
Right, which I'm fine with.
That's okay.
2 years later, Sonny Von Bulow in Reversal of Fortune, and she and Jeremy Irons are both amazing in that movie.
Yep. She also made, if memory serves, I think 1990 was also Hamlet. She was the best Gertrude I've ever seen in a movie version of Hamlet. She was the best. This sort of brittle, neurotic, ferocious. I mean, I've seen other Gertrudes on stage who've been very good in different ways, but she is the best Gertrude I've ever seen in a movie version of Hamlet.
All right, so in a 9-year span, we just rattled off as many wins as Jodie Foster's had in the last 35, and I haven't even gotten to 1991 yet. And to be fair, her career kind of, at that point, it takes a turn, and for whatever reason, Glenn, she lost the momentum, so to speak. I mean, she was good in 101 Dalmatians, The Paper in 1994, which a really interesting movie that didn't work for reasons that I'm not totally sure I understand why, but like a lot of great people were in it, and Michael Keaton's really good in it, but I don't like that movie.
You just don't buy it as a movie about the news, about a news.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, Glenn Close is perfectly cast as a bitch editor, but that's the problem with Glenn Close. That's what happened after. I mean, what happened to her after Reversal of Fortune and Hamlet and Dangerous Liaisons and Fatal Attraction was, I mean, when she started her career, if you remember, her movie career, she was this Earth Mother kind of actress. You know what I mean? She was in The World According to Garp.
Yeah, she was Jenny Garp.
She was in The Natural. She was Maxie. I mean, Next is not a good movie, but I mean, she was a very sort of good, kind, warm person. And even in Jagged Edge, I mean, she's a career woman who gets burned by a guy she's like this guy Jeff Bridges that she's defending and sleeping with at the same time.
Yep.
But then Fatal Attraction happens, and it totally changes her career.
And not necessarily for the best.
No, I would say not at all. Like, she went on to give great performances in other movies. But if you look at the sort of the narrow scope, and sort of, I would say, narrow negative scope, she never recovered from that. And I think that at some point, and this is what happens with Jodie Foster too, smart actresses who convey intelligence in movies suffer, because the way that screenwriters understand intelligent women and the way some directors understand intelligent women, it isn't always for the best. And they think that there's a threat there in cerebralness and in intellectuality. It winds up getting smart women stuck in bitchy roles. And Glenn Close, much more extremely, I think, than Jodie Foster, got stuck playing a bitch, or she got cast in the minds of people as a bitch. The best movie she made during the early 90s was a movie called Meeting Venus. And the director of that film is Istvan Stabo. He's a Hungarian, Stabo, and she plays an opera singer with Niels Aarstrup, who is a fantastic actor. And her performance in that movie is great. She's dubbed, I believe, by Dame Kiri Kanawa. I can never say her name right.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she's dubbed in that, but she's fantastic in that movie. And that was an example of a European director understanding how to handle an American or any intelligent woman. And I think that she just kept working with American directors who just were like, whatever, you're smart, you can be a bitch. Look at her vice president in Air Force One.
Yeah. I actually like Air Force One. I think I would put that in her win column. Yeah.
That's a win for her, because the movie was a hit. It was like, oh yeah, Glenn Close. But I mean, that part was not, it was, think about Glenn Close. If you cast her, she will give you everything she's got.
Yep.
So you never have to worry about that.
I have to say something, because you brought up the Fatal Attraction turning point. Sometimes this happens with actors or actresses where they nail the part to the point that you actually secretly kind of convince yourself they're deep down like that in real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the baggage I have with her from that movie, I've taken with her to every other movie she's ever made.
Yep.
It was like, she was so good as the total psychopath girlfriend who you eventually just have to murder her because that's the only way your family's going to be safe. I've never been able to separate that character from her.
Mm. So
not her fault.
You can't do that. Bill, you're a really smart, perceptive,
Thanks.
Cultural intaking kind of guy. If you have a hard time doing that, can you imagine how hard it is for Glenn Close to be taken as anything else by people who make our movies?
Right. And you know what else? The interesting thing with her, she was a phenomenal SNL host. I don't know if you remember. She was great.
When did she host SNL?
She was great. I can't remember what year it was. I'm going to look it up right now.
Oh, probably. I remember what she did at the end of the 80s.
1992.
Oh, really? Okay. I remember. Did she do it twice, maybe?
Maybe. One of them they did a Big Chill Fatal Attraction combo sketch. But right. I always think, you're right. She did do it twice. I talked with Seth Meyers about this on the podcast before, so people have heard me mention this, but I always thought SNL is like a phenomenal litmus test for actors. Mm-hmm. If you can pull off that show, that means something. I don't know exactly totally what it means, but, I think, for instance, like Gwyneth Paltrow and Anne Hathaway were both great when they hosted that show. And I feel like that means something. Like Anne Hathaway, the fact that she handles that show so well is a good sign for her as a career, because you have to do so many things. You have to do comedy. You have to play characters. That tells me that she's going to have a long career. Whereas like when January Jones went on, she was probably the worst host they've had in 3 years. It's like, oh, I get it. So you're going to be doing on Cinemax in 5 years. I get it. That's
right.
But
Yeah.
Anyway, hold on. We got to wrap this up. We got to get to a verdict.
Okay.
And again, we're not crapping on Jodie Foster. I didn't mean this to be a rag on Jodie Foster. This is all about the perception.
Can I just say one thing real quick about Glenn Close? Which
please do.
Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
I think that Glenn Close, the thing that we haven't really talked about is that Glenn Close did other stuff. She gave great performances in TV movies. She was in Sarah Plainenthal. She did Serving in Silence, that Margaret Kammermeyer story. She
did something about Amelia. Remember, there's something about Amelia in the mid-'80s?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was before she was like, the Glenn Close.
And she did Damages.
She did a lot of, right. She did. Damages. Oh my God. The first 2 seasons of that show it's some of the most shocking television acting I've ever seen, where just out of nowhere, the clouds turn gray and lightning and thunder start coming out of nowhere. She's incredible on that show. And she gave 2 or 3 really iconic theater, like Broadway performances during that run too. I mean, so she did a lot of stuff during that period, and it's not, I think that the reason she wound up making a movie as bad as Albert Nobbs, where she plays a woman who pretends to be a man to keep her housekeeping job in Ireland. It's just because she missed the movies, and I think she understands that at some point her career just got away from her because of Fatal Attraction. And I think that now is a really good time for her to consider coming back to the movies and just working there a little bit more too, if she can find the parts that give her something to do. But let's go back to Jodie Foster. So
can we say for Glenn Close, can we say underrated?
Oh, super underrated. Yes.
Mega underrated.
Well, I mean, but let's put it this way. Mega underrated when you put her alongside the person that I think culturally everybody thinks, talk about a market correction where the actor sort of fought against being market corrected is Glenn Close. Glenn Close and Meryl Streep, everybody was like, it was like Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. Like, at some point, one of those women had to lose because the market couldn't handle both of them. And the loser, quote loser, was Cyndi Lauper. In this case, the quote loser is Glenn Close. But by any other measure of a successful career, Glenn Close is a legend.
All right. Considering I technically am your boss, even though I don't feel like I'm your boss, I'm forcing you to write a market correction piece. It's a great concept. Just do it. Just get it done.
There's a lot of them.
Well, here's the best one. You left out the all-time best ever, and I've written about this in my basketball book. Michael Keaton versus Tom Hanks. Eventually, it was a showdown, and eventually one person had to win. Yeah. And Michael Keaton he stepped it up. He said, you know what? Watch this. I'm going to be Batman. You're not going to beat this Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, it was actually a 10-8 round. Tom Hanks was on the canvas crawling around looking for his mouthpiece, came back up, and then just rolled off one of the best 8-year stretches anyone's ever had in the history of Hollywood.
That was a real game of chicken. That lasted. And think about what Tom Hanks was doing, like, after Big versus Big came out in 88. Michael Keaton made Batman in 1989. And Tom Hanks, I think Turner and Hooch might also have been 88. I don't remember now. But, I'm
going on IMDb right now. So, here's the part you left out. As Keaton is nailing Batman, and that's like he becomes just a mega star.
Turner and Hooch might be the same year or something.
It's Turner and Hooch was 89, but here's Tom Hanks's 1990, the year after Michael Keaton has now raised the stakes in Batman. Tom Hanks responds with Joe versus the Volcano and Bonfire of the Vanities. The biggest debacle of his career until, I guess, Da Vinci Code. So now it's like...
Well, Da Vinci Code isn't... For you and me, that's a debacle. But
for him, just him as an actor. Yeah, I know. I know it made some cash. So, at that point, it's over. Michael Keaton wins. And Tom Hanks didn't even get off the canvas until A League of Their Own in '92, which he was great in, and then that got the momentum back. But
he was on the canvas in '92. That movie sort of saved his bacon.
Yeah, and then boom, Philadelphia, Sleepless in Seattle, Forrest Gump, and we're off. And Michael Keaton is making the paper, and he's reeling, and then it's over. Tom Hanks just market corrects the hell out of him.
Yep.
So that could be a good topic for another podcast. So Jodie Foster, you're begrudgingly admitting that she's overrated.
I think you're backing me into saying that because I would never say that. I think she is actually properly rated.
You think she's properly rated? Wow.
I think she's properly rated. I think we all recognize Jodie Foster's cultural value. I think her legacy. I think giving the Accused performance and giving the Silence of the Lambs performance. Because think about the Accused for 1 second before we go. Forget Silence of the Lambs. I don't think anybody could have played that part, but I think that sort of character has become a very common staple, mostly because of her.
Yeah.
In the TV movies and in the TV shows, procedurals that we get in both TV and film. I think that Clarice Starling as a type, thanks to Jodie Foster's performance, is something that we can all sort of take for granted now without even thinking. But think about what she did in The Accused. She didn't make that character one bit sympathetic. It was a great movie because it wasn't about whether or not you liked Sarah Tobias. It was about your understanding that what happened to that woman was wrong. I mean, this is the modern resonance of that movie, actually. When we talk about Trayvon Martin, when we talk about that Steubenville case, and we talk about that kid who got tasered the other day in Miami, like, what we're talking about is not the behavior of the victim. What we're talking about is the prosecution of what appears to be a crime. And the brilliance of that movie was that it forced an audience to look at a woman as the woman she actually was, not as some saint, not as some romanticized figure, but as a woman who had a horrible thing happen to her that she didn't deserve. And Jodie Foster, as an actor, played exactly that. She didn't ask anybody to like her in that movie. She didn't even ask Kelly McGillis to like her in that movie. What she asked for was to be respected and given a fair trial, and for her lawyer to respect her. And I don't know if you would get that performance today. I don't think a lot of actors would have been willing to go there. And
so if I can paraphrase what you're saying, you think that the Accused and Silence of the Lambs were two of the most iconic performances of the last 30 years by a female actress, by an actress, and that from that point on, it's a gravy train for her. Anything else?
I would say this. I'd even go a step further. I would say those two performances are better and more important than anything Meryl Streep has done. Period.
Wow.
And if you want me to pick a Meryl Streep performance that I do think is really important, I would pick She-Devil and I'd pick Adaptation. Those would be the two movies the two movies that nobody else would pick. And Cry in the Dark. Cry in the Dark. Those are the three great Meryl Streep performances as a piece of acting and as a piece of character writing. And
I'm a weirdo because my favorite Meryl Streep performance, she wasn't even the star of the movie, but if you watch Kramer versus Kramer again, she is, it's a nothing part. She's amazing in it. I've said the word amazing like 20 times. I'm like The Bachelor, but she takes a nothing part. And that movie resonates with me for a whole variety of reasons because my parents were getting divorced like right when that movie came out. So that's basically like, that's like one of my movies, but she is so good in that movie and every scene and what she had to work with. Like you come away from that movie in 1979 or whenever it came out and you're just like, wow, she's going to be one of the biggest stars. Like there's just no way this woman isn't going to be a massive, massive star. I agree with you though. You might be right on the Foster thing. Like The Accused and Silence of the Lambs might be better than any Meryl Streep performance. I haven't seen Sophie's Choice in like 30 years. I mean,
Sophie's Choice is it's not a good movie, but she's very good in it. But there's a thing about Meryl Streep, and we've talked about this before, and I've made this analogy before, but Meryl Streep, for me, is quintessentially the big thing of beef that gets put on Fred Flintstone's car at the end of every episode of that show, of the Flintstones, and hits the car over. Like, she is the movie 90% of the time.
Yeah.
She's very infrequently she is cast in movies where she is as much a part of the ensemble, where the writing is as good as she is an actor, where the directing is as good as she is. I think that I think Death Becomes Her is a good example where everybody is on the same page. And if anybody hasn't seen her in Death Becomes Her, they should see her in Death Becomes Her, because she and Jodie Foster, she and Goldie Hawn and Bruce Willis and Robert Zemeckis are having such a good time together. And the movie, for about 50 minutes, is hilarious. And even when it turns into a science fiction action movie, it's really good. But
I'm interrupting you because you're stepping on one of the future episodes of Overrated, Underrated, Properly Rated. Because we got to break down Meryl Streep.
Okay, let's do it. We'll do it next time we do this. We'll do Meryl Streep.
No, next time we do this, we might have to do Michael Keaton.
Ooh.
There's a few others I want to do. I am now greenlighting this show. This has become an official running show. I really enjoyed myself. I think Jodie Foster, I'm going to give her overrated in the sense that I don't think she's on the Meryl Streep level, but you swayed me on the importance of those two movies and the gravy train aspect of her career. And I do think there's something to be said for that.
Yes,
because,
but I would also go on.
Well, I just think, put it this way, after 1991, if you had told me that the career that she was about to have over the next 22 years was the career she had, I think we all would have thought that was a major disappointment. I think we all would have thought there were more great things happening and that she was going to be the defining actress of her age group and generation. And I'm not positive that unfolded that way. And when you see her in a movie like Elysium where she's bad, it reminded me of that. Anyway, we have to go. I'm glad we had this discussion. You swayed me a little bit. I feel like I swayed you a little too, though.
No, that she was bad. I recognize she was bad in the movies you think she was bad in, but I still think that she works hard in everything she does, so you can't fault her for lazy. She shows up to act every performance, so there's that for me. And there's also the fact that she never gave up. She knows who she is, and she wants to explore that. And even if I don't want to watch her do that from movie to movie, her commitment to herself as a persona is very fascinating to me. And I think that she just gets respect. She gets respect as a female director. She gets respect as a hard worker. She gets respect as a person who just tirelessly tries to find the right things for her to do. I just don't think there are enough parts for her to explore that anymore, and that's the problem. But I mean, you think she's overrated. I think she's properly rated. I don't know who wins between us, but I think
she's overrated as a top 5 actress, but you swayed me on the point that maybe it doesn't even matter after those two movies.
Maybe it doesn't. Yeah. And I can also think of 5 other actresses that I would maybe rank above her as performers too. So there's that.
Until next time, Wesley Morris, what movie are you reviewing this week on Grantland?
The Butler.
Oh, my Lord. I'm excited for that one. I feel like when I saw the trailer for the first time, I wasn't positive it was a real movie.
Oh, my God. It is so real.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
Because I kept looking for Kenan Thompson and Jay Farrow. I was like, oh, this is really the movie? But then I was kind of like, I think I want to see this. Wesley Morris, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We will see you on Grantland this Thursday. As always, a pleasure.
Thanks, you guys, for listening. Thanks, Bill.
So I get to sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.